Stephon Castle, the bright spot in this is that he's been the facilitator all season long. So he's been able to be able to go through his growing pains. And the one thing that I look at is the two-man game, because we know in the playoffs, you got to have that two-man game and that chemistry. Wemby and Stephon Castle, they have that.
12 months earlier, none of this looked sustainable. San Antonio Spurs fans were excited about the future because of Victor Wembanyama. But excitement and certainty are two different things. The second the Spurs drafted Stephon Castle, the conversation instantly split into two sides. One side saw the size, the defense, the feel for the game, the winning pedigree from college. The other side saw the shooting percentages and immediately panicked. 26% from three in college is the kind of number that follows a prospect everywhere. It becomes attached to every scouting report, every debate show, every social media argument. And in today's NBA, bad spacing can destroy an offense before it even starts. That was the fear, because Wemby already bends defenses by himself. Teams are desperate to clog the paint against him. So if Castle's defender could simply sag off and ignore him, the entire structure collapses. Suddenly your franchise superstar is trying to score through three defenders every possession. Suddenly your offense becomes predictable. Suddenly the fourth overall pick doesn't look like a solution anymore. He looks like a problem. Analysts called it a gamble. Some called it irresponsible roster building. Others said San Antonio drafted another project player instead of helping their generational superstar immediately. And the scary part? Early on, the critics looked right. December hit hard. The rookie mistakes stopped looking temporary and started looking real. The jumper wasn't falling. The turnovers were climbing. Defenses were daring Castle to beat them, and he couldn't consistently do it yet. There were games where the offense completely stalled in his hands. At one point, he was averaging one of the worst turnover rates among young guards getting real minutes. The confidence looked shaken. The pace looked too fast. Every possession felt like a test he hadn't fully studied for yet. And the NBA doesn't wait for young players to catch up. One bad month becomes a narrative. One cold shooting streak becomes a label. Suddenly, people weren't asking whether Castle could become a star. They were asking whether he could even survive next to Wemby long term. That's how brutal expectations become when you're drafted into a franchise trying to accelerate toward contention. Fans want growth immediately. Media wants answers immediately. Opposing teams attack your weakness immediately. There's no patience for development when your teammate is already being called the future face of basketball. And while all of this pressure kept building, Castle stayed quiet. No public frustration. No excuses, no dramatic responses online, just film sessions, practices, and games where he kept getting thrown into difficult situations, whether he was ready or not. But this is where the story changes completely, because a lot of young guards can survive success. Very few survive humiliation. Castle did. Somewhere after New Year's, the game started slowing down for him. The rushed decisions became calculated ones. The loose handle tightened. The hesitation disappeared. Instead of reacting to defenses, he started reading them. And once that happened, everything looked different. The scoring numbers climbed. The assist numbers climbed even faster. More importantly, teammates started trusting him. Coaches started giving him more responsibility. That's the hidden checkpoint for young guards in the NBA. Talent gets you drafted. Trust keeps you on the floor. And suddenly, Castle wasn't just surviving minutes anymore. He was controlling stretches of games. The same player analysts called a spacing disaster was beginning to manipulate defenses with patience and timing. The same player critics wanted benched was slowly becoming the connective tissue of San Antonio's offense. Not the superstar, not yet, but the piece making the entire machine function properly. And while most of the basketball world was still focused on his flaws, something dangerous was quietly happening behind the scenes. The Spurs realized they may have found the exact running mate Wemby needed after all. That offseason became the most important stretch of Stephon Castle's career, because for the first time since entering the league, nobody was talking about what he could become. They were talking about whether he fit at all. And those are two completely different conversations. Development gives players hope. Fit determines whether organizations stay patient. While the spotlight stayed locked on Victor Wembanyama and the future of the San Antonio Spurs, Castle disappeared into the background. No viral summer workout clips, no nonstop media tour, no interviews promising a breakout season. Just quiet work inside empty gyms. Rebuilding the jumper, tightening the footwork, repeating reads over and over until they became instinct instead of hesitation. Because Castle understood something most young guards don't understand early enough. In the NBA, talent gets noticed quickly. Weaknesses get hunted even faster. And every defense in the league already knew exactly what they wanted him to do. Shoot under pressure. Make decisions at full speed. prove he could punish defenders for cheating often. If he failed at those things again, the Spurs' entire vision around Wemby would start cracking before it even fully formed. But while Castle was rebuilding himself, San Antonio was rebuilding the roster around him. That's what made the pressure even heavier. De'Aaron Fox settled into his first full season with the Spurs, bringing proven scoring and real star-level shot creation. Then came another massive move. San Antonio drafted another high-usage guard, another player comfortable controlling the ball, another player expecting touches immediately. Suddenly, the conversation around Castle shifted overnight. The shooting concerns were no longer the biggest issue. Now, people wondered whether there was even enough room for him anymore. 3 guards, 1 basketball, 1 franchise centerpiece in Wemby. Somebody had to sacrifice touches. Somebody had to lose opportunity. And around the league, most people assumed Castle would be the odd man out. Analysts predicted reduced usage, bench units, smaller responsibilities, the kind of slow demotion that quietly kills a young player's confidence before he ever reaches his ceiling. Because this league can be ruthless with timelines. If a young player struggles while new talent arrives, organizations don't always wait around for the breakout. Sometimes they move on before it ever comes. And for a moment, it genuinely looked like Castle might become the forgotten piece of San Antonio's rebuild. Then, everything changed, with one decision nobody fully saw coming. After nearly 3 decades leading the franchise, legendary coach Greg Popovich stepped away. And suddenly, the Spurs entered a completely different era. New leadership, new philosophy, new offensive structure. And instead of forcing one guard to dominate the system, the new coaching staff built something smarter, something balanced. Fox became the downhill attacker. Wemby became the gravity center defenses couldn't ignore. The younger guards developed without carrying impossible pressure immediately. And quietly, almost invisibly, Castle was handed the role that mattered most: connector, decision maker, the player responsible for making every other piece function together. That role doesn't always create headlines, but it wins games. Because basketball at the highest level is about processing speed, reading coverages before they fully form, punishing mistakes instantly, making teammates better without stopping the rhythm of the offense. And once the Spurs put Castle in that environment, his strengths exploded. The patience looked sharper, the passing looked effortless, the confidence looked real. Suddenly, the player people feared would destroy spacing was becoming the reason the offense flowed cleanly in the first place. And the scariest part for the rest of the league, he was only beginning to figure it out. Opening night of the new season felt different immediately. Not because Stephon Castle suddenly turned into a 30-point scorer overnight, but because the weaknesses teams used to attack were no longer easy targets. Defenders couldn't simply abandon him anymore. The jumper wasn't elite, but it became reliable enough to force closeouts. And once defenders had to step up even half a second faster, the entire geometry of the floor changed for the San Antonio Spurs. Driving lanes opened for De'Aaron Fox. Passing angles opened for Wemby. Rotations started arriving late. The offense stopped looking cramped and started looking dangerous. Castle's scoring climbed, but the real transformation showed up in the assist numbers. 7+ assists per game in year 2. Top-tier playmaking from a player scouts once doubted could even handle primary ball duties. That's not normal development. That's a complete shift in identity. Because the version of Castle entering the league looked like a defensive-minded secondary guard. The version emerging now looked like the offensive organizer of a future contender. And suddenly, the NBA realized San Antonio may have solved the hardest problem in basketball: finding the perfect backcourt partner for a generational superstar. The wins piled up fast after that. 60+ victories, top-tier offense, elite defensive rating, one of the best net ratings in basketball. A team people expected to need another 2 years was suddenly overwhelming opponents on both ends of the floor. And the chemistry between Castle and Victor Wembanyama started becoming impossible to ignore. Every possession looked connected. High pick and rolls turned into easy dunks. Help defenders got punished instantly. Double teams became risky instead of effective. Analysts started throwing around nicknames. Fans started treating them like the next great duo. But the most terrifying part wasn't the highlights. It was how sustainable everything looked. Castle wasn't forcing offense anymore. He was controlling tempo, manipulating defenders, making simple reads look devastating. And that's usually the sign a young guard is about to become a star. Not when the game speeds up around him, but when he starts slowing the game down for everyone else. Suddenly, the league's biggest fear wasn't just Wemby becoming unstoppable. It was the realization that San Antonio had accidentally built the perfect ecosystem around him years ahead of schedule. Regular season hype only carries a player so far. The real judgment always comes in the playoffs. That's where reputations change permanently. And when the postseason started, every weakness people still secretly questioned about Stephon Castle got tested immediately. Pressure defense, physicality, half-court execution, opponents trying to force the ball out of his hands. Early in the playoffs, the games became ugly. Tight possessions, slower pace, defensive battles where every mistake felt massive. Then, disaster hit. Victor Wembanyama went down during a critical stretch, and suddenly, the young guard critics once called unreliable became the only player capable of organizing the offense consistently. That's the kind of moment that exposes players instantly. Either you shrink under playoff pressure, or you announce yourself to the league. Castle responded with complete control. Big scoring nights on the road, efficient playmaking, calm decision-making in hostile environments. The same player once labeled a project was now leading playoff possessions with a franchise superstar sitting on the bench in street clothes. That changes how organizations view you forever. And the deeper San Antonio advanced, the scarier Castle became, because every round added evidence that his growth wasn't temporary. The pressure improved him. Shooting percentages climbed under playoff intensity. Free throws became steadier. His reads became even sharper late in games. Opposing defenses started trapping him harder, bumping him more aggressively, forcing the ball out earlier, and none of it fully worked anymore. That's when the narrative officially flipped. Castle was no longer the uncertain prospect trying to fit next to Wemby. He became the reason the entire Spurs' future suddenly looked terrifying. A 21-year-old guard with size, composure, playoff experience, and rapidly improving shot creation is the exact archetype every team in the NBA spends years trying to draft. San Antonio already had one generational advantage with Wemby. Now they were discovering they might have another foundational piece growing beside him at exactly the right time. And this is why front offices around the league are starting to panic quietly. Because dynasties usually begin before people realize they've started. At first, teams convince themselves the young core still needs time. Then, suddenly, the wins arrive faster than expected. Then, playoff experience arrives. Then, chemistry forms. Then, one season later, the same promising young team becomes a legitimate championship problem nobody wants to face. That's exactly what's happening with the San Antonio Spurs right now. Stephon Castle is only 21. Victor Wembanyama is still years away from his physical prime. The supporting core is locked in. The offense already works. The defense already works. And the most dangerous part is that Castle's biggest weakness still hasn't fully matured yet. If the jumper keeps improving even slightly, the entire league's defensive strategy against San Antonio collapses completely. Because then, you're no longer guarding a talented young team. You're trying to stop a perfectly connected machine built around impossible advantages at every level of the floor. That's what makes this story bigger than one breakout season. This isn't just about Castle proving doubters wrong. It's about the moment the NBA realized San Antonio might already be ahead of schedule again. The same franchise that built championship cultures across multiple eras suddenly looks prepared to do it one more time. And every playoff possession Castle survives now becomes another step towards something larger later. More confidence, more control, more experience in moments that destroy most young guards. That's the terrifying trajectory other teams are watching develop in real time. A player once criticized for his fit is becoming the exact reason the Spurs fit together so perfectly. And if this version of Castle is already this dangerous at 21, the real question haunting the rest of the league isn't whether San Antonio can contend this season. It's how unstoppable this core might look 3 years from now. So if you enjoyed the video, make sure to subscribe to NBA Echoes, because the next era of basketball might already be forming in San Antonio right in front of us.